Today we're going to talk about colour mixing and hopefully explain to you a very simple process and understanding of how to get the most out of your colours. I put out 3 colours today: ultramarine blue, which is basically a cool blue, and I'll explain the concept of warm and cool as we go through this process. I've put down crimson, which is a cool red, because it tends to have a look of a bit of a bluish tinge to it. If I compare that to, say, something like vermilion, you can see perhaps when you look at the two that it has got a little bit of maybe yellow in it, turning it a bit on the orange side. I'll just make a note here that vermilion is a warm colour, and as I said, I'll explain a little bit of that as we go into it in a minute. Now, the thing, hopefully, the simple approach to this is just to remember there are only 3 colours that you have to remember that are the primary colours. They're natural in nature. They're not necessarily able to be made. There are a lot of synthetic processes nowadays, but the fundamental blue, yellow and red, they are basically the primary colours, and they're called the primary colours because they come naturally in nature. We have, along with these 3 primary colours, the ability to mix colours in between, which are then called secondary or harmonious colours. The word harmonious, I think, is used simply because when we're mixing 2 colours together, they mix and become a harmonious combination of those 2 colours. If we tried to mix 3, we wouldn't have that harmony. So, and not that that's strictly important, but it is handy to know. If I pick up a little bit of the red and a little bit of the blue and mix them together, it's going to make a purpley colour. Now, the benefit of mixing rather than using a straight tube colour to have purple, by mixing the red and blue together, or any of the primary colours together, it gives us the opportunity of creating a reddish blue or a purple or a bluish purple. And again, that will relate to warm and cool, which I will try and explain a little bit more detail as we progress with this. If I add a bit of white to that, you can see that this is going to be a bluey purple, or it's going to be a reddy purple in comparison, and you can perhaps see the difference between the two there. So now if I mix up the yellow and the blue, I'm obviously going to get a green colour. And also this may help you remember the 3 primaries, because when you think of a set of traffic lights, we have red and yellow, stop and caution. And if you're trying to remember the 3 primary colours, that's at least 2 that you can remember if you can think of traffic lights. And obviously if you mix up red and blue, you're going to have then the green as well. Hopefully that doesn't confuse you and helps a little bit. Now, if I add the white to this, you'll notice a couple of things about white. It will actually lighten the colour, its value, but it will actually dull the colour. It will reduce its intensity or its chroma, and I'll go into those terms in a minute. But again, in this instance, I can control the type of green I have just simply by adding more blue or more yellow to that mix. And in this case, I've mixed a lot of white to show you how it will dull the colour. I'll just mix some straight blue and green together here so you can see the difference when I don't add white to it, just how much more intense that colour is as a green compared to, say, it with the white added. If I add red and yellow together, I'm going to get an orangey colour. Now, as I said earlier, lemon yellow is a cool yellow, crimson is a cool red. By adding the yellow, what I'm effectively doing is making the red an orange colour, which is going to be the warmest colour amongst these mixes. So yellow has the effect on the red of creating a much warmer colour, and that will apply to all of the mixes actually, that if you're wanting to create a warmer colour, you can add a bit of yellow to it. Now that applies to this crimson being a cool colour and the vermilion being what I considered a warm colour, and you can see that the vermilion has got a bit of yellow in it. It's the yellow that's creating the warmth there. Understanding the difference between warm and cool will be extremely beneficial to your colour mixing, especially if you're finding you're mixing a lot of grey, yucky colour. And that's because when you have two primaries mixed together, in this instance the blue and the red, or the yellow and the blue, or the yellow and the red on their own, you basically will get a pure colour, a pure harmonious colour. But if you add the third colour to it, so anytime you have two of the primaries mixed alone, you'll get a pure colour. If you add the third, then you're going to start to have a bit of a muddy colour. If I have this orange here, it's a very clean looking orange. I mixed only two primaries to do that. If I add the third primary that I hadn't mixed, you'll notice how grey that colour will grey off in comparison to it without that third primary included. So always remember, whenever you have colours where you're introducing the three primaries together, red, yellow and blue, when you mix them, you'll be flirting with creating a greyed off colour. And you'll notice how grey that colour is when I start adding the white to it. Very nice grey, by the way, but still grey in comparison to that. If I mix up the red and blue together and I get this purple, and that purple is too pretty, too strong for me, I can add a little bit of yellow to it, and that yellow is immediately going to start to dull down that very vibrant purple colour into a greyed off purple colour. So it has its uses. It's very important to understand how you can use a primary colour, its complement. In other words, you mix two of the primaries together, whatever colour is not mixed is the complement of the two primaries that were mixed. Two primaries mixed, blue and red, giving me purple. Yellow is the only one that wasn't mixed. It will grey off that purple colour. Blue and yellow mixed together gives me green. To dull that green, if it's too vibrant, I'll just add a little bit of red to it. That's the third primary, and it wasn't originally mixed, so therefore I now get a dirtier coloured green colour mix, as you can see how grey that is when I add the white to it. So in summary, we have three primary colours. When you mix them together, you have a secondary or harmonious colour. That often is a very pure colour. When you try and mix the third primary, that's when you start to get into greys. And greys are wonderful things. We tend to paint in grey in a lot of situations. We don't tend to paint with pure colour. So you need to understand how to create shades of grey. But if you're mixing colour and you're getting dirty colour repeatedly in your paintings, you're not understanding why. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be because you're mixing the three primaries together. And how that can happen without you knowing is if you're using, say, something like a nice cool clean blue, and you choose, say, a warm red instead of the cool red already having a bit of blue in it, the warm red having a bit of yellow in it. If I'm mixing that into this, effectively what I'm getting is blue, red and yellow, because the red and the yellow are making the vermilion, and the darker red is now becoming an orangey colour with the yellow added. And when I add that to the blue, I've effectively got the three primaries together. So we have this beautiful, wonderful mix up here of very pretty colour, mixing the blue and the bluey red together. And now, as you can see, by mixing the blue and the vermilion, that's the orangey red together, look how dull and grey that is in comparison. So still beautiful grey, but it's a grey colour in comparison to the vibrancy there. The terms that are helpful to know in describing colour, the first is hue, and hue is the local colour. So the local colour basically is red, yellow, blue. That's the local colour. The second is chroma, and chroma is also, you can say, is the intensity of the colour. So if you look here, it's a very high intensity of colour. This is less so, it's a duller colour. This is a very high intensity of colour compared to this one. This is a higher intensity of colour compared to this one, and so on. So chroma is basically how vibrant or high keyed the colour is. Saturation is the amount of pigment that is in the colour itself. So some colours are far more powerful. Phthalo blue is a very powerful blue. Its pigmentation is stronger than the ultramarine blue. The Viridian, for instance, archival crimson are very powerful colours with great saturation, which means you don't really need as much of them in your colour mixing process. The other very important aspect of this, and I'll try and spell it correctly, is value. So the value is on a grey scale of, say, do 1 to 8. Normally it goes 1 to 10, but the grey scale would have white here, black here, you'd have a middle value here, and a grey scale will just get consistently darker each step. And with this pencil I won't get a pure black, and then as it goes down it gets continually lighter and lighter to white. So in the grey scale you're looking at black up here, if you can imagine it, and white down here, and this area here is, say, the middle value. I've done another video on values and how important they are and understanding them, and I'd highly recommend that you have a look at that video under Lindsay McDougall Art. It's going to be one of the things that will definitely help improve your art process. So value, in this instance, the blue is, say, a darker value than the yellow. Is light in nature, obviously, so therefore they tend to be in the higher keyed side of the value scale, and of course the darker reds and the blues will tend to more towards the darker side of it. There's a lot of information and understanding on how you use values in painting, how you can key a painting to be bright and sunny or to be a high key painting. You're going to use these sorts of colours to continue that high key looking painting, or a low key painting, a winter's day, etc. You tend to be using these cooler colours, which is a pretty obvious process, but it does obviously help you understand when you use something in a middle value by, say, mixing some of these colours together, maybe with a little bit of white to change the value. But remember, white will definitely dull the chroma in your colour as well. Another quick thing, don't know if I can, I'll try and put a link into one of the videos which explains colour a little more and how we can use colour to create mood and emotion, etc. And whether it's a high key or a low key painting, we can create drama with the values and with the colour choices that we make when we're deciding how we're going to literally paint a subject. The other thing, I guess, just to summarise above before I go any further, and that is remembering that you have only 3 primary colours, and if you mix any 2, you will have a harmonious colour. If you add the 3rd colour, it will inflict a greying process. You have to excuse my writing, I'm in my garage at the moment and it's freezing. So 3 primary colours, red, yellow and blue, and then if you mix those you have harmonious colours. So when you mix them you'll end up with harmonious colours. And anytime you mix 2, whichever colour you did not mix will start to create that greying process, and hopefully that will help you avoid making dirty, mucked up colours and understand why, perhaps that's happening. The other quick thing too, when I was speaking about values, often you'll find when you're painting in the beginning, when you're mixing the colours and trying to get something accurate, you end up over mixing. You tend to end up with, instead of a nice strong keyed colour in the dark range, you end up with something more middle value, or a nice light colour. You keep mixing, changing, trying to add, trying to improve something, and you end up coming back into this middle value range. When you do that, your paintings tend to start to look really boring, really dull. Trying to put too much detail too early into a painting can also cause this over mixing and starting to push your colours into that middle value range. If you're finding that, pick some dark colours, very obviously dark colours, and put them harshly against the lighter colour in your painting, or in contrast to an area where that dark area needs to be a strong dark, and push the boundaries of the dark and just see for yourself the difference that it begins to make, to your painting. Vice versa, if you have a very dark areas of your painting, you're missing that vibrancy and that power in your painting, then make sure that you up the light range of it to contrast heavily against the dark. I hope this has been helpful. I hope it helps you with the color mixing. I'd highly recommend as an exercise that you try and mix, say, a vermilion by mixing a yellow and a red together to try and get something like that to happen, and get an understanding of mixing warm colors with cool colors and how they become grayer quicker, and generally because you've got the 3 primers in there creating that. Anyway, I'll hopefully get this up and posted soon, and I'll see you in the next video.